can never be paid what you are truly worth. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and a while back I showed you how to read a personal statement of military compensation, which, by the way, you should download before you retire from active duty, because for some reason it just disappears. And the reason that you want this statement of military compensation is so that you truly understand the totality of what Uncle Sam has been paying you. Now, you're going to find people who interpret this total amount as how much you're worth, and they'll say that that's how much you should be paid by future employers. Later, I'll come back to why I think that isn't really true. But first, I want to touch on a more, fundamental issue of your worth and how much you should expect employers to pay you. And just to be clear, when I say employer here, I mean a non-government job, a civilian company. And that's important because in broad terms, there is a big difference between the kinds of goods and services that the government provides and the kinds of goods and services that a civilian company provides. Private industry tends to focus on goods and services where there is a fairly direct link between the cost to produce those things and how much customers are willing to pay for them. By contrast, government agencies tend to focus on goods and services where there isn't such a clear direct link, and it would be difficult to let market forces set prices. Now, your military transition is likely to expose you to these differences, and it can happen in a kind of unpleasant way. See, here's the thing. Putting a price on national defense, well, that could be a difficult task. Many economists don't even try to figure out what is the value of having a national military. Never mind the fact that most civilians would have a hard time figuring out just how much that military is worth to them personally. So the compensation that you've been receiving as a military service member, well, it's better to think of that as the amount of money that's necessary to get someone to do the job. When you get to private industry, you're going to discover that they think about your compensation very differently. Employee compensation is a cost that eats away at the bottom line. Every dollar that an employee gets is one less dollar that the shareholders get. But so what? I mean, how does this help you make that leap from uniformed service member to corporate employee? Well, there's two implications that anybody transitioning should keep in mind, and then a third one for people who are retiring. Number one, on average, the amount of money that you generate for the company you work for must exceed the amount of money they give you. Otherwise, over the long term, that company is going to lose money and they're going to fail. Sure, there are going to be some people who make more than they contribute, but if you want to make money, you've got to be generating money for the company. And this can have a bunch of follow-on implications. Focus on actions that boost the bottom line. Work in an industry where your talents actually produce value. The second major implication of all of this comes back to that personal statement of military compensation. I'm going to upset some people when I say this, but military compensation can be pretty generous for the things you have to do. And part of the reason for that is that military service comes with a bunch of BS and aggravation that you just wouldn't see in a comparable civilian job. I mean, think about an 88 mic transportation specialist. At first glance, he just looks like a military version of a CDL truck driver. But the civilian truck driver doesn't have to make height and weight, pass PT test, have a uniform inspection, go to the rifle range, perform staff duty NCO duties, deploy to a combat zone, dodge IEDs, self-recover, and then show up at 5 a.m. to stand around all day for a change command ceremony. So when you look at your personal statement of military compensation, you got to ask yourself, how much of that is compensation for garbage that your civilian equivalent doesn't have to put up with? Finally, here is a thought about retirement that just kind of like lurks in the back of my brain. If a company can never pay you what you are truly worth, then why do you pour your worth into a company? Why not pour that value into yourself and into your family? There's a lot of value that comes from being available to your family on short notice and not being chained to somebody else's desk. So why not stop trying to maximize cash and start trying to maximize value? Personally, I think that if you're retiring from the military, it's a good idea to at least take a little bit of time and assess what your real mission is. And if you want to see my thoughts on this, watch this video.